So today I'm going to review the second episode of the 25th season of South Park: The Big Fix. And in this episode, Randy goes to a marijuana convention, and they found out that, the reason why that marijuana sales are going to eventually go down because they don't have a lot of African Americans and other minorities selling weed. So a lot of people look at it and say it's really a white-owned business. So Randy invites Token's family and over for dinner, and then he takes pictures and selfies with them just to be like, okay, well, yes, black people really support our business and stuff like that. And then also later on in the episode, like his father has, Token's dad has a lot of different ideas to sell marijuana and be successful, like as business partners. And they did talk about being business partners, but Randy decided to be a hypocrite. And so Token's dad just bought the farm and then bought the farm next door, and now he owns now he has like a good piece of the marijuana business. And then Randy's kind of like saying, well, he's eating into my profit. Like, how can a bunch of black people take an idea that we stole from them, selling marijuana, and then make a profit off of it too? So I like this episode because it does talk a lot about the hypocrisy of racism. Like, obviously, it's that thing too. Like, yes, obviously, there are things like twerking, gangsta rap, recreational drugs, and dancing and rhythm and all the other stuff, that traditionally come from other cultures, not just black cultures but other cultures. Or you even look at like music, like dancing and musicians, like like Elvis Presley and a lot of other famous dancers were inspired by African dance. But when somebody's white who takes that and makes it their own, makes a lot of money. If eventually there's a thing where they have to kind of like where people dissect and saying no, it came from black culture, a lot of people don't want to hear it because they just don't like that idea of that everything comes from Africans. It's just the white guy came up with everything mentality. Like the idea of black culture, whites are. I mean, black culture is influenced by white culture, not black culture is influenced by white culture. A lot of people want to believe that because of systematic racism in America. The idea that, blacks need to learn from whites, not whites need to learn from blacks. Unfortunately, that's been a very racist attitude for a long, long time in our history because obviously, America was based on racism, and one of the racist ideologies is that blacks are inferior, or that old idea of the white savior, that that blacks need a white man to teach them everything, or even reteach them their culture or their ideas. So I kind of like this episode a bit, and I think the other thing that I kind of liked is how like Stan tries to better his friendship with Token, but obviously Stan looks like a racist, and so does his family because of how his father's acting. Like, he's just mad that Token's dad is getting into that Token's dad's taking their profits. So it's almost like Stan is not a racist, but his father is just Randy Marcy's just all about his profits and not liking that and gonna make excuses, like saying like he's gonna play the race card for whites to kind of make Token's dad look like the bad guy when actually it's just his incompetence. So it's definitely an interesting episode, but I also kind of think that they do kind of do a lot of good things. They show like more so like how Stan is a redeemable character because he cares about the mistakes that he's made, and then also like how Randy is not that much of a redeemable character because he is somebody that he's a very, very self-interest human being, and obviously it comes from his just huge level of immaturity. And obviously, his family pays the price, and that's kind of maybe one of the things we see out of Randy Marsh. His biggest flaw is that he does a lot of bad. He's like Homer Simpson. He does, and Peter Griffin. He does a lot of bad things that just detriment his family without realizing it. Like, so he's technically like a sociopath against his family. And like a lot, and there are some people who are like that. Like where like you have a father that just wants to do whatever they want. Or they represent something that's negative, and then everybody gets associated with it in their family. And that's the same thing with women and other, fraternal like figures that are in charge. So it's definitely an interesting episode. I think the other thing they do talk about is Token's name. Obviously, South Park, they're playing a joke on you because back then, like, there was Token Black production. So originally, Token's name was spelled Tokenblack. So obviously, the Token Black, the house nigger, kid. And I think that his reason why his name was spelt like that was because for two reasons. Maybe that's just how people saw him as a token black person back in the 2000s and the 90s. But nowadays, we maybe his name really is has always been like Tolkien, named after J.R.R. Tolkien. So it's interesting like that conversation because I think like again because I know it's like I'm a minority. I've had people mistaking me for black, so I definitely lived in a lot of white communities when I was a kid. And obviously, that does happen where you are the token black kid. Obviously, you look at Randy inviting his parents over for dinner just because they're black, and also like what are they having? They're having ribs and macaroni and cheese and fried chicken. So obviously, those are all stereotypical things for black people to eat. The other thing is that obviously there are people like Stan who just don't who have made some mistakes with Token. Like he thought his name was Token, not Tolkeim, like after J.R.R. Tolkien. So, they have a conversation, and then, Stan gets more educated versus just like his idea of like, well, I'm gonna like do what I want to do without communicating. And ultimately, if you want to beat racism, it comes down to communication. You can't just like run on your own ideas or be like, oh my God, I made this mistake, so I want to like make everything better for this black person. You have to kind of at least talk to them and say, you know what, this is what I thought, this wasn't right, and this is how I want to change. And then mostly the time, I think people are kind of more forgiving because you're trying to understand, and you're trying to like acknowledge that you've been wrong, have the humility, versus like somebody like Stan's dad who doesn't have humility and runs on his own like impulses. So it is kind of that dichotomy of racism. Like racism really exists because of people's impulses and emotions and insecurities, and ultimately just doing things as a facade to advance, where their social or their business or their political status. That is Stan's father, and then Stan the kid. He doesn't want to be racist because he has humility, and ultimately when he makes mistakes, he just goes to the drawing board. But a lot of his racist attitudes or unintentional racist attitudes end when he talks to Token, and then Token is a very forgiving person because he understands that there are people who are of different races who may have some racist thoughts out of mistakes, and then they just and that they just need some correction, and that they do want to get better, and they do show it. So I definitely think that it's a very interesting episode, but I also kind of like how they make Randy a little bit of an unredeeming character because obviously he's like the comical dad, and then also he has a lot of dimension. So you kind of like can see him as a person that has some regrets. You see him as like a bad guy, you see him as an asshole, and you see him as a good person. So I think like this is obviously one thing, being kind of racist is good for his character because obviously if you want to make a dimensional character, you have to make them despicable on some certain level without going the lengths of Cartman or Peter Griffin. So I think that they add some dimension to his character. And then I also think it makes a good statement about like how sometimes when minorities are successful, what sometimes gets revealed is that how racist other people are because they are jealous of that success. Or if somebody has a strategy to make them successful because they're street smart, sometimes we're like, that's not what we want because it goes against what we've intended and other things like that. So I definitely think that it's a very interesting episode, a very cerebral and powerful one.